All right. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who are joining who don't know me, I'm Beth Monahan. I'm the founder and CEO of InkHouse. And welcome to our media panel, our broadcast media panel this morning. You're not going to hear from me very much. I'm just here to welcome you and to thank our panelists, Maria and Archit, for joining us today, and Smitha, who's a director of media strategy here, for organizing this panel. I'm so excited about the topic. I won't spoil it all for you, but I will just say that this is really important, and the media is changing every day. And we're going to dive into some topics about how to talk to the press, but also about diversity in the media. And so I will hand it over to Smitha to take it away.
Thank you so much, Beth, and thank you to our wonderful panelists who are here, and of course, everyone joining us from home. I know we've all just been so excited to have this discussion today, and really are so happy everyone is here. So I wanted to get started. I know you see two of our wonderful journalist friends here. We do also have Mary Goody, who is a producer with NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. Now, of course, in very true broadcast journalism fashion, she had a very last minute shoot that required her to go out of town. But in the midst of all of that, she still recorded a few sound bites for us, a couple of answers to the questions we'll be discussing, and of course, an intro. So we will get to all that, and Mary will still be very much a part of this discussion, along with the other two wonderful people we have here. I'd like to start off by kicking it off with introductions, and I know Maria, you are going to take it away for us.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. I'm Maria White Tillman. Right now, I'm a writer-producer with the Black News Channel. That's a new cable network that just begun. Before the Black News Channel, I was at a local Atlanta NPR affiliate, WABE Radio, where I was a writer, producer, reporter. And prior to that, I was with CNN for many years, where I really honed my chops, my journalism chops there. And my last position with CNN, I was a senior news editor. Thank you so much for having me. And now I'll send it to Archit. Oh, you're on mute, Archit. There we go.
Thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate that. You know, just like live TV, we always have our, I wouldn't say technical issues, but technical fun as we like it, as Smitha just pointed out. Things never go as they plan, but I'm sure the next 60 minutes is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you, Smitha, and thank you, Beth, again from InkHouse for having us. We really appreciate it. So my name is Archit Seshadri. I am a correspondent and reporter for Nexstar Media Group. Nexstar owns around 200 TV stations around the country. So I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, covering the Southeast. And as you can imagine, it's been a really slow news year. No protests, no politics, or no pandemic. So we've just been scraping our heads to figure out what we should be covering. My journey started very interestingly. I grew up in India and Australia, and I actually went to Georgia Tech, and I was an engineer before switching into media and journalism. So I was in consulting for about 6 years, and I've worked through many news markets, including Macon, Georgia, Augusta, Charlotte. I was at CNN as well with Maria. We found that out a few minutes ago, but we must have just missed each other. We were throws apart. And then I spent 2 years in India anchoring in New Delhi. So I like to call myself an engineer turned storyteller. I know what it's like to be on both sides of the spectrum, literally to be pitching to the media as well as being in the news. So we hope the next 60 minutes is important and exciting for you. And we're here to answer any questions and keep this a really lively and fun discussion. So Smitha,
Yes.
turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you both for those wonderful introductions. And Archit, I have to say, it wouldn't be a Zoom meeting if we didn't have someone on mute, right? That's just not, now I feel like that's a thing. That's a thing. So now we did test this, so hopefully this works, but I'm gonna play Mary's intro video as well. So here's a share. You're gonna see me hit play and cue it up, but here we go. So meet Mary.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Goody. I am a producer at NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. I have been in my current position for a little over 2 years now, and I've been in network news for about a little over 8 years total. I am extremely sorry that I couldn't be live with you all today. I was really looking forward to it, but as we all know, news is unpredictable, and we just have to make do and pivot when things are thrown our way. So I wanted to still send a little bit in to join the panel today. I just want to start by just saying what I think diversity even means when it comes to news and when it comes to the newsroom. I mean, when I look at diversity, I think a lot, or when most people look at diversity, I think they, may think of just like skin color or race. But I think it's just like much deeper than that. Diversity, it can be, diversity in gender in the newsroom, in sexual orientation, in ethnicity, in race and skin color as well, but also geographic diversity, where someone is from will shape their experience, people's backgrounds and how they grew up, and different languages that are spoken, and just the way that we all maneuver through life. I mean, I think it's just important to always keep in mind that like there is just no one in the world that is exactly like you, right? So I am a Black woman that is from the South. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I went to college on the East Coast. And so, that transition from going to the South to the East Coast is something that is unique to me. And so I've been on the East Coast ever since. I'm in New York now. And so I have a perspective that not everyone has in my newsroom. And so these things, definitely define who we are. But at the same time, they're things that we're knowledgeable about, or we're passionate about, or that may interest us a little more, or something that we're able to speak to. So, if someone in the newsroom is talking about a story, and they're talking about something that they don't really have much knowledge on, and there's someone in the newsroom that does have a little more knowledge on it, it is up to that person to raise their hand and say, hey, I think what you're saying is a little out of touch, and I have XX experience, with this, and I know this firsthand, and I think we need to delve a little deeper into this. And so that's really why I think diversity in the newsroom is important, just because we need all of those different perspectives. And we don't just need that one like token Black person, or the token woman that everyone goes to for certain issues, or the token person from the South or from the West Coast, or whatever the case may be. We need a range of people, because my experience as someone from the South may not be the same experience as someone else from the South's experience was. And it might even be, another Black woman from the South that didn't have the exact same experience as me. So we need all of those different voices, and we need everyone to come forward and share their knowledge and their passions, so that we can have diversity in the newsroom, and so that we kept diversity on our shows and our newscast. It's super important. And it's also important when it comes to interest, like I was saying, into pitching. There are just certain things that people who haven't experienced something have no knowledge that particular subject or that particular theme or whatever it is even exist if they have no experience with it. And so we all have to come together collectively and make it so that our audiences learn something, because we're all learning too. I learn from our show every day, and I learn from some of the pieces I work on, and even stuff that I felt like I did have knowledge of. Sometimes or a lot of times I learn new aspects of. So it's the idea, the process of pitching and the process of ideas that is important, but it's also making sure that things that are already in the works are broadened out and don't feel out of touch and aren't told from only one perspective. That's the main reason why I think diversity in every aspect is just super, super, super important in the newsroom.
Wow, there's so much there. And you can see why Mary wanted to make sure that she was still a very important part of this conversation. So thank you, Mary. I know you're going to be watching this afterwards. I'd love to, before we I know we have two things to talk about today. We want to talk about diversity, and then we want to talk about pitching and getting media coverage. But I'd love to just kind of start off with getting some reaction, to some of those things that Mary was saying, because I think there's so many powerful tidbits there that are going to come up over and over during our discussion this morning. So Maria, I can kick it off to you, just if you want to share kind of some thoughts on that.
Thank you. Wow, she was fantastic, and she really covered the gambit of everything, right? And I agree with her with everything she said. Diversity is so important. And, in diversity in leadership, in the news director level, in the general manager level, the decision making, diversity at the table, we need diversity in thought. As she was pointing out earlier, my opinion, my background is so different from, say, anyone in our listening audience this morning. So for me, I've had some experience with, like, I'm from the West Coast, I'm from California. And when I moved to the South, I had some experience with, getting my opinion and my thought out to the newsroom, like, hey guys, remember me? I'm sitting here at the table and I have an opinion on this. So yeah, I think it's very important that we really mix it up, and not only in race, but in gender, sexuality and everything else.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And Archit, same question to you.
I think when we talk about diversity, right, it's so. I think as Mary pointed out, it's not limited to one thing, but it's an amalgamation of so many different things. And one thing that I hope everyone takes away is also it's okay if you don't understand or know something, but the intention behind the question that you ask is also so important, because what may come across as perhaps unaware could be hurtful. So I think the tone is so important when you're trying to figure something out or understand, and what your goal is, right? Even if someone perhaps is, if you're, for example, Smith and I celebrated Diwali, which is the Indian Hindu festival of lights. You may see things about it, you may hear about it, but if you aren't sure, you could certainly look it up. But I think there's a way where you can ask and learn and come from a place of learning where it isn't as offensive, as opposed to just the way that small tone can shift so many things. And whenever I'm talking to people or trying to help them, I always try to come from a place of education instead of judgment. We put on that hat individually, I think it helps. But I mean, time and time again, most of my reporting has been in the South, in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And one question I'll get a lot is, where are you from? Recently, 2-3 months ago, we were covering a story at the state capitol. It was a Justice for J6 rally on the insurrection at this US Capitol. And, I always, before the cameras roll, I always try to get to know who the person is, just a quick little, banter. And this person said, so where are you from? And I said, well, I'm originally from India, but I've lived in Atlanta for most of my adult life. We roll in the interview, and then at some point she said, well, you won't know this because you didn't grow up here. Or it was just it was a personal attack. And I think there's ways that how we as humans or reporters or journalists can handle that. And it really was like, wow, this is 2021, and there are so many people who are like this. And at the end of the interview, I did politely ask her, I said, ma'am, I'm not sure this is relevant to the interview. You asked me where I'm from. What does it have to do with you being here? I'm here covering your event. And she just sort of said, oh, you're so programmed. You're the media, the usual media bashing and political, it had nothing to do with that. I mean, this was, again, it was sort of an eye opener, but also going back to the point of, I did not use her soundbite. Why not?
Don't blame you. Yeah, don't blame you.
Wow, like you're almost like you hear about it, you read about it, but until it happens to you, it's like, this is sometimes unfortunately the world that we live in. And just being aware and knowing how, if you come across a situation like this, how you would handle yourself and the best way to handle yourself. So going back to what I said earlier, I think just tone and coming from a place of empathy is always going to be the best way to just be a good human being.
100%. And I think you handled that so well, right? Because when you're in that situation, it's just, I have some similar experiences. I mean, for background, I started my career as a TV reporter, first as a producer, then a TV reporter back in 2005. And so, of course, things were different, conversations were different. And my first newsroom, I say, was, actually pretty diverse because it was in a big market where I did work as a producer. But then since I went down that reporter track, I went to some smaller newsrooms and smaller, markets, as we call them, DMAs. And I do remember very early on, I met with the news director. I'm not going to say where, but met with a news director, and we were having a chat. I was in his office, and he said, and I quote, this is pretty much an exact quote, he said, you're great. And then back then we had resume tapes, right? So that was examples of my work. He said, you're great, but you just don't fit the demographics of this market. And to me, that just, and when someone says that to you in that moment, it kind of takes you a second to process it, right? Because I don't even think I understood fully what he was saying. And I remember coming home, my parents were so excited, how did it go? And then mentioning that comment, and it's like, then it kind of hits you, the magnitude of what was said, So it's like, and that was so long ago, but the fact that we are in 2021 and people are kind of having these similar sentiments, is really kind of, that's really upsetting to hear that it's still going on.
Smitha and Archie, both of your stories, essentially what those people were saying is you don't belong here.
Yeah.
And wow.
Yeah.
That's, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Saying that it's sort of one of those, it's, as we said, right, it's 2021. We've seen so much already happen in the world, no matter what year it is, but sometimes you're like, really, did that just happen? And not to be insensitive, but it's also like, what do you want someone to say? What do you want? And really, what difference does it make where they are from, right? Whether you're from Atlanta or you're from Delhi or you're from Argentina, what difference does that make to that person, right? It just,
well, and Archit, I think what you said about curiosity, the intention behind your question matters. And we're talking about diversity in the media and the broadcast media. And so you didn't use that woman's soundbite. And that's, it's nice to let people suffer the consequences of their own actions, but, but that's relatable in real life. I think what we see is that everyone's afraid of the other, right? And so there's one way to be. If you're from this town, you didn't grow up here, you don't know the way to be here. And it's a fear of people being different from us. So I think you have to overcome that to find the curiosity to say, oh, what is Diwali and how do you celebrate that? And, why is that meaningful to you?
Yeah. Right. And speaking of Diwali, really quickly, I was going to add, I know some of we have a lot of questions, so we will stop. Listen, when you have journalists, there is a lot of opinions, a lot of stories to tell. But like, exactly. It was really short. We had a thing on Nextdoor this week of Diwali, and some people had commented, and there were both good and bad comments. And people said, "I'm so tired of all the fireworks. What is up with fireworks every other weekend? This is ridiculous. Blah 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 blah." And some people who were not Indian also responded back saying, "This is Diwali. This is the Hindu festival of lights. If you can observe July 4th and New Year's Eve or New Year's, why can't people observe this?" So there was a lot of empathy coming from that place as well. But I think it sort of went into this whole discussion about, well, it's not good for pets. My pets are scared, blah blah blah. And then I just was like, oh my God, it was a back and forth. So I felt like sometimes you don't have to always step in, but I just wrote back to saying, hey guys, it's so great that we live in a country where we can celebrate all these cultures. I empathize. I understand what you were saying about the noise. I get that, but let's just be human and respect the fact that we have so many cultures and traditions to celebrate. If you don't want to celebrate, that's okay, but let's not criticize someone for celebrating their festival. And it's not like a month long, right? It's like, it's such a good example, July 4th to this, right? It's the same thing. It's 2 days out of a year or 3-4 days out of the year. And I also threw in, maybe they were celebrating the Braves win. I don't know.
Oh yeah. Everything, right? Lots to celebrate.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Maria.
No, I was going to say, I just think, Archie, you handled that very well. And it was your prerogative not to use that question, because I'm sure there was so many other answers that were more germane to your story than that one simple off question,
Yeah.
And the funny thing is they were almost like bashing the media. Again, I feel like we get this a lot. Like people, I'm sure you all know about this, but there was so much of the media is spinning something, or the media is giving you this narrative. As a journalist, I always will tell you, at least from my perspective, is you want both sides. Whether you agree or not, your opinion really doesn't matter. Pro and con, Republican, Democrat, for and against, whatever the story is. And then the audience, people at home, you get to decide what makes sense, what doesn't, and sometimes there isn't a right or wrong answer. You know,
Oh, thank you for
it's
that
really up to you
reminder.
to decide.
Yeah.
I have a question in from
Yep.
someone in the audience. So can I read that?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Okay. It says, okay, if you're curious about where someone was born or their ethnicity, because it will help you understand them more as a person and get their background, what is a more sensitive way to ask where they are from originally? Is there ever a time to ask that, or is it never appropriate?
Good
Well,
question.
I just think that during the middle of an interview, I don't think it's appropriate to ask that. Maybe after the interview's done and you're doing some one-on-one banter back and forth talking, if you're curious, it won't hurt. It obviously it's in your tone and in the way you ask it. But I just think that's the way we learn, is we ask questions. But I think the mistake a lot of people make, that if you're not Black or white, you're not American. And that's so not the case.
Right.
You know, we have brown and Asian people who are born in this country who are American, or immigrated to this country and are American.
Right.
So I think it's
Yeah.
okay to ask the question, but I just think, know your setting, know your timing.
I have a funny story to add to this with me and Smith and I both had this experience together, so I think she'll appreciate the story.
Yeah.
You know what exactly I'm talking about.
I think I do.
We really were social butterflies. Smith was in Atlanta earlier this year, and we met a buddy of ours downtown, a new buddy, someone that we'd never met. And he was someone who was interested in walking this, the Beltline and going to a wine bar, blah, blah, blah. And this person just was like very, charming and fun. We were kind of like just getting to be like, oh, let's invite you to dinner. His name was Raphael, but we didn't know what ethnicity he was from. And going to answer this question, it's like, how do you bring that up without sounding, disrespectful? We just want to know, right? Just to be like, where is that from? So I think we asked, where is that name from, or what is it, culturally, where are your parents from, something like that.
Okay.
I think it was more like we shared our own story, and I think that's a good way to kind of be wherever you're from. Say, hey, I'm from here. My parents, are German or Irish ancestry. How is your family? I think that's such a inclusive way to ask that question than be like, well, what is your ethnicity? Where are you from? It's just like same question, just two different ways of asking it.
Yes.
Exactly. And that's such a
Exactly.
good point. Such a good point, right? Because that, like, the latter is kind of aggressive. It's almost like, where are you from? Right? It can almost be perceived as a negative versus the first one. And it's funny, I don't know if you guys do this, but I've kind of trained myself now when people ask, where are you from? I'm like, well, I'm from upstate New York, originally from India. Like, I don't know. That's something I've just over the years started to say. And I don't even, just like thinking through it, I don't know where it came from, but I just almost answer that question now before people have a chance to ask me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of a very interesting. So kind of pivoting this, I think this is a good place to pivot this to the media. Both of your newsrooms, of course, you both work at, big newsrooms. How diverse are they, today compared to maybe when you first started in the business? Can you kind of walk us through that? Because I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. So when I first started way back when, it was like one or two Black reporters, and one Asian reporter in a local newsroom in California. Fast forward to CNN. In the beginning, it wasn't that diverse in there. It was a lot white male and a lot white female. Now, over the years, of course, they've really gotten diverse, obviously. And where am I at now? The Black News Channel. There are quite a few white people working there and of other nationalities, which is really nice, because when I was hired, my hiring manager said to me, and I thought it was so important, he said, Maria, we want to show what a diverse newsroom looks like. We want to show that even though we're called the Black News Channel, we want to bring diversity to the table. And I thought that was so important and so wonderful to hear. And he's a man of his word. The newsroom looks really like America. It's primarily Black people there, but there are other nationalities as well. So that's wonderful.
That's great. Yeah. And Archith, kind of same question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
So with Nexstar, the newsrooms that I work with are mostly in the Southeast. I'm not sure how many Asian American reporters or talent that we have. And I think Smith and I have had this conversation in general. It's not specifically the newsrooms, but I think overall in the country, right, I think we can count how many people go on air or are produced. I think that's just a different story altogether, because there's just not there's not as many Indian American or Asian American folks. But I think there is a good mix. I think it can obviously be better. But I will say, in terms of collaboration and ideas, we have, especially being in the South, we have a lot of our African American anchors will talk about Black History Month coverage or Hispanic Month coverage. And I think it's so important. Like when Diwali happened, I told them about that. Coming Out Day or Pride Month. There's a lot of different things, and I think, as Mary said at the beginning, it's not limited to one or two things. But I think it's individually sort of us having the courage to share it. It may not worry. Everything may not get to air, but I think having those conversations is important. One thing that was interesting a couple of years ago, and I hope that's changed, was I pitched a story on July 4th about covering Sikh Americans who wear turbans, and they have those Gurudwara, which is their temple,
right?
And it was sort of shunned, or sort of, oh, we don't want to cover that on July 4th. And I was like, why? Why wouldn't you want to cover that? They're equally Americans, going back to what you said. Like, well, I think it would set the wrong message. So it was sort of, this was again 8-9 years ago. This was a while back, but it's still sort of baffled me. But I think having those talks and those pitches is important to know that. And they didn't run it, they didn't do it. And at a certain point, as an individual, there's only so much you can bat. But I think continuously making sure in our reporting, in everything, right? And in media panels like this, look at the four of us, right? Diversity doesn't always have, if we had 4 people of the same ethnicity and the same gender and the same look, that's not really diverse. That's really 4 peas in a pod.
Well, and Archis, what you're saying is really, I think what I'm hearing is that we have these preconceived notions of what is American.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the 4th of July might be the most, severe day where we have these, like, it's like the picnic in a small town where you can go watch fireworks in the park, right? That's not how everyone celebrates the 4th of July here. And we might think that, so that's so interesting, just broadening our definition of what is American by showing how different types of Americans might celebrate July 4th or any other holiday.
Yeah. And I say that to everybody too, not just limiting it to a certain group. Even folks who, for example, the Persian year is, I think, Nowruz. There's Ramadan and Eid and other cultural festivals and religions that maybe some that we hear of are not sure. And I'll ask my friends, hey, I know there's 2 different Eids. Can you help me understand what it is? I would like to know whether you celebrate it or not, and wishing them, right? And just a simple message, like to my friends who are Muslim who celebrate this festival, Eid Mubarak or whatever that is. I think that small tone, or for the Jewish New Year, for Hanukkah, and I'll text people who I know who are celebrating it. I think it's that small level of, like, you remembered someone's cultural holiday and significance, and taking the time to understand and learn. And they did that to me, and I was like, that is, it sort of comes back full circle. Not that I wanted them to, but I think that's how we learn about that. And there's so much learning for all of us.
Oh, and it shows you care about each other.
100%. 100%.
Nice.
Yeah, and what I think it's interesting too, because what we're talking about, everything we're talking about in our everyday lives, in our lives outside of, I guess, our jobs, it translates into the job, right? Like everything you guys are saying, it's actually the same thing as we see in the newsrooms and in the workplace. And I do know Mary also recorded something related to this about representation of diversity in media and how it's changed during her career. So I want to play that video as well, because I think she has a really good response to this as well. So let's cue this up. Here we go.
I wanted to answer this next question, which is how has representation of diversity in media changed during the course of your career? So I have been in media for 10 plus years now, and I've worked in varying newsrooms that have looked very different. There have been some newsrooms where I've been the only person that has looked like me at times, and I do feel like it was my responsibility at that time to speak on issues that I was maybe more familiar with, or had like some different ideas about. I do think that the newsroom that I'm currently in is very diverse based upon, you know, past newsrooms that I have worked in. I've worked in local news, I've worked at the networks, and so you know, just all across the board. I do think that the newsroom that I'm in right now is the most diverse that I have worked in, and I really think that it's reflected in our stories. I mean, all the time we are covering issues from. Sometimes I'm like, wow, like the issues and stories that we're covering, you know, sometimes it just amazes me because there's some things that I would never even think of, and I just learned so much. And I think diversity in the newsroom is also important in the fact that, you know, when you have a diverse team, they're more accepting of diverse stories, right? So the stories that we're telling are super diverse, and of course that goes through like a process of, you know, that where the stories are being chosen, who's choosing the stories, and when those people are diverse, it really just it just shows so much in the newscast.
It does.
I've definitely been in newsrooms and in situations where when the newsrooms weren't diverse, where some of the stories that I thought should be told and that I would pitch weren't necessarily bought or accepted. And that all goes back to just the lack of diversity in the newsroom. There was just no effort in really telling those stories, or no interest in really telling those stories, because the people that were selecting which stories were to be told just really didn't have an interest in it, and didn't think the audience would have an interest. I think I'd heard that so many times over the years. It's just like, oh, that's just not something that our audience would care about. So like, it's a diverse issue, like that's cool, but our audience probably just like doesn't care. So let's pass it up. And I'd be like, no, this is like a really, really important issue. And it just seemed to kind of go over the heads of people that weren't necessarily diverse. And so, yeah, that was a very common excuse or common response that I would get. But going back to the newsroom that I'm in right now, very diverse, and because of that diversity, a lot of ideas are accepted. You know, if you have an idea and you're able to really, really craft it, it's pretty much, you know, it's going to be accepted, because we need to really, really tell those stories. So I think that I do hope that newsrooms are diversifying. And I could say the newsroom I'm in right now is definitely a prime example of a diverse newsroom.
Good.
Oh, wow. There's so much there, right, that we could talk about. And what is remarkable to me, you know, we didn't touch base with Mary before this. Like, we didn't have this conversation with her before, but there's so many similarities in what she's saying and what everyone here has said as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just so many similarities. When I first, as I said earlier, when I first started, the newsroom wasn't diverse, and I was I was junior editor, whatever it was, some entry-level position. So I felt I wasn't empowered to speak up. But there were so many stories as I think back that I really wanted to pitch, but there really wasn't anyone who I felt comfortable going to, and all that. But fast forward to now, to my days at CNN, and to now at the Black News Channel, I'm empowered. I'm encouraged. There's always been someone who I can like pull their coattails, say, hey, you know, in the meeting this happened, but listen, let me tell you why this is important. And then sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. You know.
Right. Yeah. And Archit, do you have anything kind of to reflect on what Mary said or what we've been discussing?
I'm sad that she's not here, but I love these videos, and I feel like That's here in
Yes.
spirit, and like, oh, he has
Yeah.
such nice nuggets of wisdom. I will just add, going back to what we sort of talked about earlier, is I think knowing when to speak up, but also, sometimes I feel like as journalists or as human beings, we almost have to put on our sales hat. And you're not selling a product, but you're standing up for yourself. And that can be 3 sentences, that can be just short, sweet, and effective. And sometimes you may not get the answer that you want right away, but the fact that you stood up and vocalized your opinion. I'll give you an example. It's the most basic thing, and a lot of us, Smitha, we probably relate to this as being Indian. There's a lot of people who are vegetarian or vegan or whatever your dietary restrictions are. That is an element also of diversity and inclusion. And I say this because my dad, when we travel, they'll always think, oh, there may not be any eating options for us at this place or at this restaurant or this wedding. So think about the holiday parties or corporate events or any place, and how many times we actually speak out and say, hey, is there perhaps a vegetarian option or a vegan option or a kosher option or whatever, halal, whatever that is. That's one line. And if you don't, it's always a no. If you don't ask, it's a no. But sometimes thinking about that and speaking up for yourself is probably speaking up for other people who also may benefit from that. And think about it. And I always say that if you're a vegetarian or vegan, someone who eats meat or seafood can still eat what you're eating. So you're not restricting it to yourself. But that's an example of standing up for what you believe in. And whatever that is, right? Whether it's health, whether it's religion, whatever that is, that's okay. You don't owe anyone an explanation. But I think just taking a moment to speak up for what you want, and that's it. One time in Charlotte, I remember at one of the stations, I won't name, I wanted a Friday or one of the days off. I forget. It was one day to celebrate Holi, which is the Indian Festival of Colors, which is now inspired by many of the color runs that we all see. And the news director at the time, I think, and this was way, way out of line, said, well, I Googled Holi or I Wikipedia'd Holi and it's on Wednesday. Why do you need this weekend off or something to that effect? And to me, it was kind of like, that's like me saying, oh, Christmas is on a Tuesday. Why do you want this Friday or Saturday off? Is essentially the same thing. It's like you're telling me what day I should take off for my religious holiday. That's not your place. Second of all, I don't even owe you an explanation why I need it off. So I think eventually she was quick to realize that was a mistake. But that's what I'm saying. I think it happens all the time. I think it's taking the courage to speak up and stand up for yourself, and knowing that even a miss now could be a win later on.
And I have a question from the audience, which is really about, you were talking about trying to sell stories, right? To get stories done that aren't, they're not appropriate for our audience or whatever the answer is, and how that is changing because of diverse newsrooms. I wonder, how are you experiencing the same issue as it comes to sources for your story? So quoting people who are, from a diverse range of experiences, backgrounds, religions, whatever that is that following a similar trajectory to the types of stories?
Well, for me, I have to go out and find, use my resources to help me find someone from the Indian community or Latin community or wherever. So we really make a conscientious effort to really find the voices for our sources. We don't want to just stick with the same type of people because we're all have matured over the years, right? And we've learned that our audience is diverse. I think management has learned that as well. And we really make a conscientious effort to find someone to speak to whatever issue is at hand. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, Archie, would love to hear your thoughts.
I think it's when it comes to interviewing, I think it's up to the individual as well. But I think the most basic one. I'll give you the example of the Brave. We interviewed a guy who was white. We don't want to have all of our interviews being white guys, or if it's an African American woman. We don't want everyone to be the same. You really want, and in a story like the Braves, it's just fan reaction. It's really not the end of the world. But we interviewed someone who was 80-something years old who would watch the World Series win the previous time in '95 and has been a lifelong Braves fan, and someone who's much younger this was their first world, like that is also diversity. It's age, different perspectives, different generations, right?
Yeah.
And just making sure when you have the different interviews, it's like you're wearing your casting director hat, your casting or your news director hat. You want opinions from different people. And then you as the reporter, as the journalist or the producer, put together that and weave all of that in. And even if all of it doesn't make it to the final product, at least you've done your job of getting that perspective. And maybe, even if you don't use the quote or the interview, you can attribute to what some younger fans think XYZ, but not everybody agrees. And you put the older person's soundbite in. So I think it's up to you to really steer that ship. But yeah, I think really never one side, unless it's sounds so morbid, unless it's like an autobiography or an obit. You really don't want one interview. You want as many. It's like, that's what makes it a good, compelling story.
And what's really interesting, just kind of thinking out loud, one thing, when I was a journalist, I remember I worked in some markets where, I was certainly the only Indian reporter, probably one of the few handful of people of color, right? Also who was on TV, but it also was reflected in the communities, right? There just wasn't a lot of diversity. And so now that I think about it, we really didn't interview a lot of people of color. We didn't have as many diverse voices because it just wasn't there. Right. Yeah. And so it's remarkable. Like, I don't feel like we really ever had that conversation in the newsroom, in those newsrooms, because it was just kind of the reality. You're not going to get that diversity. Right.
Right.
Samantha, do we have time for one more question on this topic before we ask other questions?
We absolutely do. Yes. We want to make sure we answer all the audience questions.
All right. Let me read the next one that came in for everyone here. So it says, as you continue to pitch for diversity in your storytelling, have you had a decision maker come back to you afterward and tell you how the story really resonated with an audience? So does sharing the successes of a story or a line of storytelling in a pitch help you push for another opportunity in the future?
Archie, I'm going to let you take the lead on that one.
Oh, Maria, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to go ahead and take it.
I was going to say, yeah, I think whenever you see someone that looks like you or sounds like you or echoes a similar sentiment, I think people love seeing someone like them on TV.
Yeah, like, do you get more viewers because of that, right? Like, as the proof in the, like, wow, we've expanded our audience because we included these other people.
Right, exactly. And I think, it's important to hear from that, right? You don't want everyone. It's like, let me give you a similar analogy. If you have a pizza and it's just cheese, it's a little boring. But if you had extra toppings, it tastes a little bit better, right?
And that.
Listen, I'm a little cheesy. It's Friday morning, so I will throw in my shameless puns and hopefully aim for a laugh or a groan.
It's all good.
We love our puns, right? But no, that's a great question too from the audience. That's why I think when we do these panels, it's so important to get the questions, not only that we have, of course, scripted, and don't worry, I haven't forgotten. We will get through like at least one or two questions about getting media coverage and how we can get coverage with you guys. But I have one more response from Mary that I'd love to play. And I want to start off with you guys to just see your kind of initial response to this question that we had pre-scripted before. With diversity, when it comes to diversity in your newsrooms, is it getting better, guys? And, what can we do to get it to where we, maybe not where we want, where it should be, because I think we still have a way to go, but how can we just improve it?
Yeah, our newsroom is diverse. It's good. But before here, I was at a radio station, and they made a conscientious effort to diversify their newsroom. They really went to like Black journalism conferences or Latino American conferences or Asian American conferences, to really go out and seek diversity to bring back to the newsroom, which I think is important. Larger markets are doing better. I can't speak to smaller markets. I hope that they're learning and growing, but I can't speak to that. But for where I am in Atlanta, yes, I just think we're doing a good job of getting all voices heard and really making a conscientious effort to reach out to various communities.
Good, yeah, good.
Yeah, I'll add to what Maria was saying, and real quick with that, right? There's so many different organizations and even panels like this, where there's the National Association of Black Journalists, Hispanic journalists, Asian American journalists. There's a lot of recruiters that go to these events, and even attendees, whether you are in the field, whether you're not in the field. These are great opportunities to attend and learn about the media, make those contacts and connections. And for people watching, that's a great way to also build relationships with people who are in the field and understand the types of stories that journalists want to cover and are able to have access to them. So if you haven't thought about it, and again, I don't get any commission from this, but those are great places to, I love going. Smith and I actually met at the Asian American Journalists Association many moons back, the AJA. And that's one of many. There's the LGBT, there's Native American, Hispanic, whichever one is available. Sometimes there's some specifically in maybe where you are. A lot of them have obviously shifted online now, so you can asking your bosses or your newsroom management saying, hey, I would love to take this training. I would love to attend this conference for a couple of days. Would I be able to get professional time off to go do this? And maybe you take some notes and key takeaways and do a lunch and learn or share that with your newsroom. That's a great value that you can bring and add to your own newsrooms, even if obviously everybody can't attend. There's so much, webinars and content, and you sort of speaking up can be a great liaison between what these organizations and different minority groups are trying to, get and bring that back to your organization.
100%. So I'm going to play Mary's video and then we'll come back. We can have one or two more questions, hopefully, because I feel like we could keep talking about this topic, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So here's Mary. Let me just cue her up. Here we go.
Okay, I'm going to answer the next question. We all seem to agree that there's not enough diversity in the media. Is it getting better, and what can we do to help? I think there could always be more diversity, right? And I do think that we are moving in the right direction, at least where I am. I think we're moving in the right direction. There's definitely there are definitely more initiatives, I think, that are in place now to, get more women in the newsroom, get more people of color, and just get more diverse voices involved. Is it getting better? I would say it's getting better. I didn't hear about any of these initiatives that I've heard about over the past couple of years. I hadn't heard about them prior to a couple of years ago. So yeah, I would say that it's getting better. What can we do to help? We need to reach out to people in our already diverse communities. And, if anyone is interested in journalism, I think it's important that we mentor and, bring young journalists up and, maybe go to the colleges that we went to or some of the groups that we're involved in, and really, really speak to young journalists that are interested in joining the field and help them to get there. I know that I went to Howard University, which is it's a historically Black college and university. And I oftentimes, hear from people that are currently students at Howard or like recent graduates, like, what can I do to, become a part of NBC? And so whenever there's an opportunity that I think they might be interested in, I'll reach back out and let them know, or, send them recent job board postings or whatever it is. If they ever have questions, I encourage them to reach out to me, in any way that they can. I want to be completely accessible and open. They can text, call, email, whatever it is, and ask me questions about what I do. So I think it's just really, really important that we reach back out into our, either social circles or, wherever we're from. If I reach back out to people in Houston and just really, really bring people up and just be accessible and answer any questions. I think that's the way that we're going to continue to diversify the newsroom.
And I really love that she brought that up too about helping other people, because Mary, that's actually how we met many years ago, is I had reached out to her when she was at ABC about a job. So, that I think too kind of brings up a good point of just helping other people too. And, she's of course part of this community, the HBC community, and having people reach out to her. Like, I love to hear that too, because I know Beth and I went to the same journalism school too, Syracuse. And so, I work with a lot of students, and to me, that's such an important part of helping foster this next generation?
Yes, on this next generation, absolutely, because I know for myself, whether it's through social media or friends or my church, I really make it a good point to help the next generation of journalists, whether they shout on me for a day or a few hours, or we sit and have a cup of coffee and talk about it. But I think it's very important to share our knowledge to help the next generation forward. Yes.
And I think with the mentor mentee thing is it can go both ways, right? Just because you have someone who's younger, it doesn't mean that they can't still be your mentor. I mean, especially with what we've seen with some of the social media stories and all of that. I think there's so much. I think cultivating those relationships is important both ways. So yeah, I think there are a lot of different organizations that have a mentor mentee program. So always find a way to either be a mentor or be a mentee, both ways, where you can help somebody else, but also continue pushing yourself to learn. I think Poynter or many of these news organizations have so many free trainings and opportunities to be part of mentor-mentee relationships with journalists and storytellers. So definitely look into that. I know AAJA also has one of those programs.
Yep. All good call outs. And speaking of journalists helping us, I do want to spend the last couple of minutes that we have together just talking about ways, and really diversity is such an important element of this, how to get media coverage. So let's say, one thing that we do, of course, in PR is that we work with spokespeople. And so I feel like anyone who works with me know I'm always saying, let's make sure we have people of color, let's have men, let's have women. We do a lot of stuff in tech. So we need to make sure that we have all of those diverse voices represented. So when someone is pitching a story to either one of you or has in the past, what are you looking for when it comes to good elements to pitch a story to you? Are you being mindful of the spokesperson? Is it, are there diverse voices offered? What kind of walk us through that process?
For me, is the story interesting? Are there, I work in TV, what are the visuals? What are the elements? In the release that they're pitching to me, do they have even the basics of who, what, when, where, why, how? I have had so many pitches where they don't tell me the date, you know what I mean? Something simple as that, the date or where it's going to happen. But yeah, just, diversity in the pitch and what's interesting and the story. And can we do it? A lot of times stories come across my desk and we just can't do everything, but we try. So
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'll add with a story, right? I think relevance is super important, and timeliness, right? At least from a TV perspective, we have newscasts that start at 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11. So almost working backwards, right? So Veterans Day was this week. So if you have a great story to pick about veterans, or the veteran that wants to talk about issue XYZ, maybe reaching out a few days before and then following up the day before. And ideally, you want to get all these interviews done by noon or 1. Because think about someone who is putting this.
Oh. Do we have a frozen Archit? I think he froze. Of course, again, wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without that.
Smitha, what I was going to mention while we're waiting for Archit to come back, I recently sat on a panel for Provoke. It's a PR industry or publication. And we talked a lot about multicultural PR, right? And we're talking about that here. But, one of the things they mentioned is that all PR should be multicultural PR, right? And that it's not just about which audience you're reaching. You should strive to reach all of your audiences. So,
Yes.
They even mentioned that for the awards that we submit for, that you perhaps shouldn't be able to submit if your campaign isn't multicultural at its heart.
Oh, interesting.
Mhm.
Yes.
That's
Oh,
very interesting.
Yeah, I was like,
That's-
yes, that sounds
Wow.
right. Right?
yes.
That is
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah, and actually, and here's Archit coming back. Archit, I know we lost
Sorry,
you for
I
a
got
second.
kicked off. I don't know what happened, but
We covered for you. Carry
it's
on.
it's like a live TV news broadcast, right? But no, I was saying, I think just having all the elements ready and keeping the pitches short and sweet is important. And if you're pitching to a journalist, right, know what the beat is. It may not always be a beat, but if you are trying to pitch a sports story, you may want to reach out to the sports anchor, the sports journalist. The best part is a lot of this is already available online. And I always like it when they message me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Emails, you just get so many. It's like throwing spaghetti in the wall. Email is not in a bad way. Email is probably the follow up after with the email. Like once you get their attention on whatever that is, right? I think that's the key to being able.
I know email is the new mail, isn't it?
I know.
True. That's
I
true.
know. I receive pitches through always LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, email. It's I receive pictures from all people walking up to me, friends say, hey, I have a story. So yeah, but to Arch's point, what time does your event start? And what time is our newscast? Does your event actually start at 5:00? And will we have time to cover it, edit it, and get it on the air for 5 or 6? Let's talk about that,
Right.
Yeah.
And if it does, right, you could always have other things, right? So sometimes a no may also mean, hey, our event starts at 5, maybe we could interview our XYZ earlier and you could maybe come here and do a live. There's always ways to pivot and pitch it, but it may not always work. But I think just being mindful and sort of doing your homework and research so important, because you can't have an interview for you at 5:00. Well, the news goes on at 5. More than likely they're going to say no.
Yeah, or maybe it's a live guest or something, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think
But if it's-
people forget about the timeliness of broadcast, right? They forget that there's a specific time when things go on. And it's a really important reminder. I remind people that about daily newspapers. They're on deadline in the afternoon, right? They're writing their stories for the next day. That's a bad time to pitch.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right.
And even just being knowing of like what's happening that week of, right, being abreast of the news and reading and being sort of in the plug. Like last week, right, we knew CDC and the ACIP were meeting about kids and vaccines. That story can almost be pre-recorded. Yes, not exactly, but that's going to happen. And more than likely, there's 2 scenarios, right? One is they're going to approve it. The other is they're not going to approve it. So if you are perhaps a PR company that deals with medical professionals or doctors, you can almost get that interview lined up and say, hey, I know this meeting is happening. Would you be interested in talking to XYZ? They are, a doctor based in New York. It'll be great. You're almost doing everything that we need you to do. And how much easier is that than you sort of having to reach out to them and waiting to be like, well, I'm not really sure what time they're available. Make it easy for them to be like, here are 3 options. Which of these will work? Here's who's available.
Yeah. So, knowing what your job looks like and giving you what you need. That's kind of like table stakes for good PR.
And also, just kind of being mindful of, oh, wow, there's a big news story going on right now. Maybe I should hold off my pitch for maybe the next day or something if it can hold off,
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
So.
And checking social media. So a lot of journalists I know put updates like, hey, I'm on OT, I'm on out of the office for the next 2 weeks, like always checking those things also to be mindful of people's schedules.
Yeah. And listen, Friday evenings or afternoons, never a good time to pitch.
Yeah.
Sundays actually aren't bad. I know that sounds weird, but Sundays are kind of like, people are like, what am I going to cover for the week? It's actually like Sunday evening. And again, short, just like keep it 3 lines and like who, what, where, what is the story? Why is it relevant? Who do you have available? Here's some sample pictures, B-roll that you can shoot or available. Boom. You've given them like most of what they need for the story. Friday, unless it's something insanely breaking, that's not a good time. Really anything after, I don't know, Maria, there's an optimal time. I would say anything before noon or in the evening. I know that sounds like, listen, we work 24/7 sort of, but never around 5 or 6 because that's when like you're cramming anyway to get your stories on the air. But even if you send it, you may miss it. And you can always follow up like, hey, I sent you this days ago. Just checking if you're interested, blah. And if they don't, that's okay.
Yes.
Well, that's a great pro tip too, the Sunday thing, Archie. I think that's interesting, right? Because you're right, then you get ahead of everyone else.
Right.
Yeah, it's really good. I never thought about that, but on Sunday, I'm kind of reading in to see what's going on and spend like an hour or 2 on my email. So yeah, that's a good point.
And also just like customizing, right? Instead of sending it to everybody, like, if you're I'll give you an example. If you're trying to send a health story, if you BCC and copy everybody, as opposed to emailing it to one person at a time, personal. And then we missed this earlier about diversity, and sort of bring it back full circle, is your name is so important. If people don't know how to pronounce your name, teach them. Phonetically spell it out.
Yes.
And one of my very first markets, I turned down the job because the news director asked me to change my name She said, can you go by another name? I said, no, why? What name am I gonna be? Andrew? Like, this is my name. I didn't say it, I was younger. I was like almost about to be like, do you want to be somebody else? Can I call you Anita instead of Anne? Like, you don't want to be, so why should I?
Well, it's so funny you say
right?
that. Yeah, it's so funny you say that because I was early on in my career too, like told, hey, maybe Samantha is better than Smitha, right? But I'm like, well, yeah, same to your point. Why?
Why?
Right? Like,
Yeah.
and Smith is really not that hard, I don't think, to say.
No.
I mean, so it's weird how people just have those, like, and again, in different, like, different markets, different experiences, but still very similar things that are happening, which is really wild.
Yeah, and if you have a shorter form of it that you're comfortable with, that's totally up to you. There's no right or wrong, but going back to what even with the PR, right? If you're pitching to someone, know their name and say, "Dear Smitha, I have this great story in this interview. Would you be interested at these times? Here's what they can talk about, and here are some opportunities for a video." And you'll hear this word a lot. You guys might know it. B-roll in TV is it's not brawl. Someone said brawl, not brawl.
Brawl.
B-roll is video that you
Brawl.
see. And SOT, which is such an outdated term, is sound bites. So sound bites is the interview. Those are so like crucial to TV broadcast, right? Because you can't tell a story without people's interviews, and you can't tell a story without pictures or video.
Right.
So B-roll is very, very important.
I would add to knowing their name, look up their pronouns if they have them on their social media profiles. Because if somebody goes by they or she and they have a name that sounds like a he that you would think might be a he, so that's a good way to get your pitch ignored.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, guys. I feel like we could keep talking. I do want to be mindful of all of your schedules, because this hour has just completely flown by.
Yes.
Smith, are you saying we're introverts? Are we not talking enough? Are we a little shy for you here?
That's what we were saying offline, like I have a feeling we need like more time for we could keep talking and talking about this topic. So you know what? This is maybe part one. We can continue these conversations. Yeah. And Archit, I did see you shared your information. You said anyone can contact you. Do you guys want to share your social handles or any information for folks who I'm sure you may be getting a lot
put them
of
up.
Sunday.
We can share them. We have them and we can share them out. Yeah.
I actually want to share, if it's okay with you guys, 2 freebies if anybody wants, and you can email me if you want. One is, I think I shared this the last time the night of this is, there's 2 different ones. One is about how to pitch to the media. So it's a little checklist. I'm very like to-do list type A. So it's like, this is so much easier for me because people have so many questions. I'm like, so one is, it's just on my website. It's about how to pitch, and the other one is how to interview, both ways, how to interview and how to be interviewed. So if you need to go through it, it's a good little Friday. I wouldn't even call it homework, weekend inspiration. So take a look at it when you're sipping your favorite beverage, and you'll be so much better than all of your competitors. And
I love
that promotion is one step away because of this panel that Smitha and InkHouse is.
Thank you. Well, I would just thank you both for your insights and your time. I deeply appreciate it. The people watching are better for it. And I am grateful to be in your orbits.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for having me. This has been fabulous. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, you all take really good care. For those who are watching, we will make this recording available offline later. And follow these smart people on social media.
Yes.
Yes. And send them Sunday emails. I have a feeling you're going to get a lot of emails in your inbox on Sunday now.
No, report back if you get any bad pitches. Let me know.
Thank you both. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Smitha. I really, really appreciate what you guys have done, and thank you for talking about this such an important topic. And I hope it leaves other people inspired to learn more and be more empathetic and aware of so many different stories out there that need to be told.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me as well. It's such an important topic and issues to bring up, and I just think. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Signing off.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.